Hey there, fellas. Sentient Potato here. I'd like to apologize for being late. Shit happened. And, yeah, it's life. But, yeah, this here is my recording of my review of The Walking Dead Volume 1, Days Gone By. Now, before I get into this review, I'd like to say that, there's so much beautiful art in this graphic novel. Like, I was just coming back and I was just, looking and just admiring because it was so good. That's part of the reason why it took me so long. I just writing the notes, it took me, I think, 3 or 4 hours, but that was just because I was admiring the art. It is very beautiful art. Like, you can tell there was a lot of effort and a lot of love put into it. And another thing I noticed, though, with the Walking Dead, there was, it had a foreword, and it was very long and kind of interesting. Also, there was a lot of exposition and rehashing of stuff, we already heard. That was a common theme in this first volume. Rehashing upon rehashing. Some of it even rehashing in the same, just the same, in the same comic book in the volume. Let's say comic book, but let's be real, it is comics. But anyways. And, when this comic starts out, it's a police shootout. Again, very well illustrated. One of the things that I've noticed, again, just really well illustrated art. It's the shootout. Not too much talking happens. They just assume the shooter is a, runoff from the Grant County prison. And in my notes here I put, looks like he'd be named Cletus. And one thing in here is, his only line is, I ain't going back, I'll die first. And they assumed backup is over 10 miles, or more than 10 miles away. And then Rick actually attempts to try to make it to the the dead to surround the dude, and then Shane gets the gunshot out of his hand. And one thing that is a very common theme in this graphic novel is blood. At least in this volume. I'm not even kidding here, chat, when I say, I was reading, and there was so much blood. It didn't matter if it was, just a regular dude. I say just regular dude. But, just a dude or a zombie. There was a lot of blood. And also, improbable surviving of gunshots. Because in the graphic novel, you can tell, they took it took a major chunk out of Rick, the shot. And then when the gun is, shot out of, Shane's hand, obviously he'd survived that, but there was a huge chunk. Well, I didn't say huge chunk, but you don't see it, but there was a lot of blood in the hand, which makes me assume a pretty good chunk was taken out. But, again, the chunk that was taken out of Rick, ain't no way in hell he'd survive that. They should have been giving him a eulogy, not a medically induced coma. Then, after he gets shot, and Shane goes, Rick! We actually cut to Rick waking up in a hospital with a gasp. And, when he wakes up, he removes the tube, attempts to stand up with the IV stand, fails, and, presses the button to call for a nurse. And, shocker of shockers, nothing happens. So, he goes to the shelf, and in the shelf, there's what seems to be his uniform, and his badge was there. So, yeah. But when he actually leaves the room, he's calling for anybody, and, one of the quotes from it was, what the hell? Did everyone just decide to take leave and take a break at the same time? And, he explores further, and he actually, takes an elevator, and which shows that we are still very early into the zombie apocalypse because, there's electricity. So it's either that there's a generator, or the substations are still going. Who knows? But yeah, he arrives on the floor, and then a corpse, and I'm just putting this very distinctly here, a corpse, not a zombie, just falls in when the elevator door opens. It was sitting, and then or I assume it was sitting, but it was, or standing realistically against the elevator door, but still, and it falls back in. And yeah, and it startled a scream out of Rick. And one thing I noted, and this is probably completely unimportant, but the corpse is missing one shoe and one sock on its right foot. Which again, there's probably nothing at all, no real significance to this, but I always thought that was kind of neat. And then, Rick yells for help and doesn't get anyone. And then, one distinction from the television show, and this is a major distinction, is, there's this door that's, boarded off. It's not chained off, so that's already a difference right there. There's just one board, like, in between the things to make sure, you can't, like, pull open the door. And there's no don't open dead inside. It's just boarded up. But yeah, Rick, sees that and goes, what the hell? What happened here? And then he made a very amateurish mistake, which is he opened the cafeteria, and we end up seeing a shitload of zombies, Chad. And when I say a shitload, I genuinely mean a shitload of zombies. It's massive, the amount of them. Also, one distinction, another distinction from the show is, at least this part of the graphic novel, comic, whatever, it takes place in Kentucky, not Georgia. Like, that doesn't happen until another issue in, that he actually gets to Georgia. Sorry about the webcam glitching. Not sure what's up with that. Anyways. And, we see a shitload of zombies, one of which even groans. And one of the things I put down here, the artwork is gorgeous. Because it is. It's genuinely gorgeous, the art. Like, there is so much effort put in, and it's really nice to see. Anyways, Rick panics, falls over trying to escape, getting everyone's attention, yells at them to stop and get away from them, asking if they understand. And he begs, gets tackled downstairs, which conveniently kills the zombie because, it hits the thing, beheads it, basically. Well, I say beheads it, basically, but did internally decapitated him, from what I could understand, the zombie, I mean. It must have hit its head just right, because that zombie was dead. And then, in trying to escape, he lands on top of the dead zombie, mind you. So it's probably that which killed it, but still. In the escape, he actually pulls the belt off his pants, gets the door shut, and, uses the belt to actually, make sure the door stays shut. Not the cafeteria door, obviously, that one was too late, but the one at the end of the stairwell. And then we are in a, parking garage with one alright-looking car. And where this says 2003, it makes sense the cars look all blocky and whatnot. Like, that was a, some sort of 80s vehicle. Possibly 90s, but it kind of reminded me of a lot of the vehicles I used to see going around when I was a kid before, the environmentally friendly, soulless car menace happened. Anyways. But yeah. The vehicle that he spots, that 80s/90s car, was locked, much to Rick's ire. But the hospital was Harrison Memorial Hospital, which I think is the same as in the TV show, if I'm understanding, or I'm remembering correctly. And he actually spots a crashed a crashed car with a corpse sprawled partially on the driver's seat and the ground, much to his horror. Like, the way the car had crashed into a pole and, the person died on impact, and it must have destroyed the brain because, it wasn't a zombie. So, yeah. And then, a little bit further, he spots the bicycle zombie, which one major distinction from the Walking Dead TV show and the comic is the bicycle zombie, because instead of being relatively there, like, this thing ain't no way in hell was moving. It was basically just a skeleton. Like, sure, it had a little bit of a pretense of flesh, but that shit was basically decayed / picked over. But he sees the corpse, sheds a tear in horror with his hand over his mouth. My guess is holding back vomit. And, the zombie clearly wants him, but again, it is too far gone. So he gets the bike a distance away and just collapses in the street for a moment, just crying in horror. And he actually bikes away while still crying. Like, I can only imagine the psychological effects from this thing. Can you imagine, chat? I wouldn't want to. Like, it's some fucked up shit. And, yeah. Anyways, we make it to Rick's neighborhood, and the houses look like hell, and the streets were covered in trash, which, again, makes sense when you consider the whole apocalypse scenario. And in my notes I put, too bad the television adaptation couldn't do this right. Because, it's funny, even crime shows could have, busted out looking windows and abandoned looking houses, like, meth houses and whatnot, and you couldn't do this for a zombie show? Make it look like, the houses all went to shit like that? Come on, man, like, they didn't have to look, the houses didn't have to look that perfectly preserved. Ah, fucking HBO really should have gotten The Walking Dead. Anyways, Rick curses and enters his home, finds nothing, and gets smashed in the face by Dwayne, who calls for Morgan. And, you know, Morgan is in horror, and he asks his son, "What did you do?" You know, because Rick was very clearly alive, and he actually asks Dwayne to grab his feet and help him get Rick inside. And then we cut to sometime in the night, or I say night, but it could be afternoon, just when the sun's starting to set. And inside the home, Morgan, you know... Oh man, I really have to put some typos in here. But, you know, we cut to inside the home that Morgan calls his now, with, you know, Rick waking up and Morgan actually asking Rick to join them for dinner and apologizing for Dwayne hitting Rick with a shovel. And Rick, who is still very ignorant to the situation and horrified at the monsters, actually asks who Morgan is and what's going on, and Morgan apologizes for the misunderstanding, and when Rick asks, you know, how it happened, Morgan realizes Rick has no clue about anything that's going on. But, you know, just questions to be safe. Because I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, but I'm assuming Morgan may have assumed, like, it was a concussion or something like that. Which, I mean, come on, getting knocked out with a shovel ain't no way in hell he didn't have a concussion. And somebody just put here, blah, 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 basic exposition covering the couple of pages we've seen. Because basically it's just, you know, it's almost, it's, you know, just basically brass tacks, almost the same conversation that was had. I want to say almost the same conversation, but a similar enough conversation to what happened, you know, with Rick talking to, you know, Morgan in the first episode of Walking Dead. So, like, if you've seen The Walking Dead, Episode 1, Days Gone By, and seen that part, you really don't even need my notes. It's almost 1-to-1. I'd say still read just to check, but it's, yeah. And, you know, Morgan explains what little he knows about zombies in the world before it shut down. And, you know, at this point, they're still under the assumption cities would be protected. And then, you know, Rick says something. I didn't really write this down very well, because, you know, I was in a little bit of a hurry. It's like, I don't know, 4 o'clock, so maybe a bit more than 3 hours taking notes, but I was just admiring the art. And anyways, but, you know, Rick produces keys to the police station and says, "Want to go shopping?" And then we cut to the Cynthiana Police Department, and Cynthiana being Kentucky. And it's in the middle of the night, very much unlike the show. And there's more exposition and background building, such introductions, getting to know each other a little better, and, you know, a small amount of humor, because, you know, as some along the lines of, you know, Dwayne only cares about 2 things: passing gas and comic books, or, you know, something like that. And it got, you know, Rick to laugh a little bit, and he felt bad for laughing. And as Rick actually, you know, opens his desk, gets his revolver, and then using his keys actually opens the armory, and, you know, they grab what they're going to. And, you know, we cut to the cruiser and the conversation, and Rick says where he's trying to go to Georgia, he's going to get the newer cruiser, which, you know, Morgan goes, "What?" And then, you know, a little bit, and then, you know, Morgan's grateful. And Rick actually hears a zombie trying to get through the fence, and pulls said pistol on the zombie, but then Morgan puts his hand on the gun and says, "No, leave it be, and save the bullet, you may need it later." Which is foreshadowing, but then, you know, they say their goodbyes, and separate. And I'm just going to point out this police cruiser, by the way, a Ford Crown Vic Police Interceptor, which is a very nice vehicle. Like, I've been in a Crown Vic. Those sumbitches have some real shit in Git, Chad. Like, it is absolutely insane. Anyways, we cut to Rick driving through a couple places, such as downtown, the outskirts, and then, you know, right next to the bicycle zombie. And one thing I noted here, for some odd reason, the speed limit sign there says it's 35 miles an hour. So I'm wondering if maybe that Rick was, you know, trying to obey the laws of the, you know, road, even though it doesn't really matter. Who knows? Anyways, Rick puts the zombie down and wipes a tear off his eye, and then, you know, he goes and drives off. And then, that is the end of the first issue of the volume. So then, we cut to Rick entering Georgia. Apparently he was in Kentucky in the previous issue, is what I put in the notes. Rick is irritated that there's no gas in the pump, actually kicks it, or I say kicks it, but kicks near it at least. And he says, "Gosh darn it." I say gosh darn it, but you know what I mean. Not again. And then on his drive he sees another corpse, and then eventually he runs out of fuel, which, you know, makes sense because, let's be real, no gas, again, like, Crown Vics don't have a whole bunch of mileage. What is the gas mileage on a 2003 Ford Crown Victoria? 18 city, 26 highway. Yeah, that thing has no mileage at all, basically. I mean, better than it could be, but shit ain't great. So yeah, anyways. Rick sees another corpse on his drive, runs out of fuel, blah blah blah. But then, with his bags of weapons on his back, he actually spots a farmhouse and heads towards it. And this part is pretty dark, and actually noticeably darker than the television show. You know, so he knocks, sees if anyone's home, says some reassurances, and comes in. Smells death, I guess. And he sees an entire family, you know, that would be adults and children, one of which has a teddy bear with it, dead of gunshots to the head from a single revolver. One of the corpses in a, I don't know if it was a rocking chair, like one of those kinds of chairs, like still has the revolver in its hand. Which, crikey. And Rick actually has to leave quickly to vomit, which is totally understandable. Then, after wiping his mouth off and putting his hat back on, he heads to the barn and spots a horse, which he says hello to, you know, talks with, asks if he can take the axe, and rides towards Atlanta with. And he has a very long, and this is very long, Chad, it was like a couple pages, if I remember right, conversation, completely one-sided with a horse. Which, you know, I mean, if that's what you want to do, talk with a horse, if that's what keeps you sane, more power to you. It's just weird. Like, just in this context, but it's totally understandable. Gotta, you know, cope how you can, but still. And the closer we get to Atlanta, the worse things look. But, you know, Rick, it kind of makes sense, I guess, but at the same time not, and I will explain why later. But Rick does not seem to be smart enough to see the clear warning signs and, you know, get out of there and catch the zombies' attention, quickly getting surrounded. And one of the reasons I'm saying is zombies instead of walkers, Chad, will become very clear later. Like, there's a reason I said zombies and not walkers. But anyways, he tries to escape and loses the horse, which dies bloody. And using this axe he had, when I say axe, it was probably like a hatchet, sort of like my Gerber one. But, you know, if nothing else, like, I say Gerber, but, you know, one of them brands. But, you know, something like that. Like, it was actually a halfway decent axe, so, you know, I could be wrong. It was something like that anyways. But he uses the axe very shockingly well. And he calls the zombies bastards and asks, you know, what the hell's wrong with them. And he shoots a bunch, including one, which, interestingly enough, looks like Lori. And that's like one of the only times you actually see a zombie that looks like Lori in the thing. So it's just, that's one of the things that kind of stuck out to me. Which, you know, it kind of almost makes me wonder. Anyways. Rick flees into an alley and gets grabbed by Glenn, which, you know, startles him, but Glenn says he can get Rick out of there, but stop using that gun, you'll have the whole city on us. Glenn says gives some reassurances, gets the ladder down, and gets Rick to hurry up and climb the ladder. And, you know, Rick was stunned because he'd never seen so many zombies, to which, you know, Glenn remarks he's a lucky man. And more exposition, and some roof hopping happens, which Rick barely makes, you know, with a gun bag on his back. And again, like, one of my many issues, like, there's a lot of exposition and dialogue, to the point I even complained in the note. Because it was absolutely insane. But anyways, they get past the skyscrapers and Rick almost loses an ankle to a sitting zombie. To which, you know, Glenn asks, you know, where the hell Rick's been the last month. And, you know, coma. Which, you know, one of them things. And, you know, Glenn gives an explanation. You know, as to why there were so many zombies in Atlanta. And Glenn actually mentions a camp, and, you know, they're heading there. And Rick says, holy shit, and he reunites with Lori and Carl as well as Shane. You know, guess he owes them more than he'll ever be able to repay. And if I remember right, this was the end of another issue, but I could be wrong. Like, it was like 8 issues in a volume, if I'm remembering right. Like, it's something like that. Some of them were a little inconsistent, so, you know. Anyways, Rick gets shown around and some introductions are made. And, you know, Glenn, you know, shows what he got at Atlanta. And there is some more dialogue, including, you know, at least on Shane's side. I say Shane's side. It may have actually been Lori's side, excuse me. About, you know, what happened while Rick was comatose, and then Lori was concerned, you know, your hand! And he says, it's from the IV. Oh. And one very common theme, this is something I noticed when I was reading this volume, they really wrote Lori to be a dumbass. A massive dumbass. Which is a shame, but, you know, it is what it is. I suppose that is one thing the show actually nailed shockingly well. Anyways, Rick has a very reasonable concern about the lack of guards at camp. And then Rick actually, starts shaking because, and I quote, "The past 2 days I've been so worried about finding you and Carl and getting here in one piece. I haven't had time to be scared." Anyways, we cut to Rick waking up with his wife and son in the tent and smiling while touching his wife's cheek, which, wakes her up. And, I don't know what the fuck is it here, but Shane says something. He leaves the tent and Shane says something. He's not sure what the hell Sornint is. Some of these notes I was kind of writing in one-handed, one hand, looking through the volume, one hand writing notes. So some of this is a little incoherent, and I apologize. I tried to fix that, but, can only do what you can do. Anyways, there's a quick conversation about Night Watch and also hunting. And there's even a post-conversation, from the shower, because, Dale has a shower. It's pond water, but still. And Dale very heavily implies that Shane was banging Lori, and, Rick brushes him off, and Dale remarks, "I wouldn't trust him around my wife." Which, Rick also brushes off, and then outside the camper he sees, Shane and Lori being friendly, but doesn't seem too friendly. So he's like, crazy old man. Which, arrogant as hell, but I can kind of see where he's coming from, in a way, but still. Rick and Shane go hunting, and we cut to Carl with Lori. And, Lori's making sure Carl stays safe. A bit of chatter happens between the women in the camp. Like, there's a conversation and laundry duty, which I put, laundry duty, ugh. And, one of the characters there is Donna. Like, there's a massive character difference in the, just in the first volume even, between the comics and, the regular TV show. There's no T-Dog, no Dixons, no Ed, no Jackie. CDC guy? Not there. No Morales, no T-Dog, any of that. It's interesting. Like, just, I wonder why they made up so many characters when they had such great characters to do. Like, I feel like AMC could have done a little bit better. But, I mean, shit. The show went shit anyways, who cares? Anyways. We cut back to the men in the middle of hunting, but mostly having a conversation, which gets interrupted when they hear a rustle. And to this point, we actually see a deer being eaten by a zombie dressed up in a dress shirt, tie, slacks, and glasses. And, in the TV show you'd hear, "Filthy, disease-bearing, motherless, poxy bastard." But, again, this ain't the TV show. This is the graphic novel, which is far superior. Shane actually questions if they should get the deer away from it, to which Rick very rhetorically questions if it would be safe to eat. And then we cut back to the laundry, where Andrea is constantly keeping watch, which Lori seems to keep dumb, and then I wrote, "But, well, this is Lori." And conversation between the two girls happens, where Lori gets asked how she met Rick, and then we learn Rick actually had a brother named Jeff. And Lori met Rick at a New Year's party that Jeff invited her to, that Rick was chaperoning, and they apparently hit it off and kept in touch in college. Lori tried lasting more than a year. She didn't. And apparently, once that was out of the way, she moved back, and they got serious. Oh, sorry about that. Webcam was being weird. And, okay, perfect. They head back to camp, and a zombie heads their way, and Alan, which is Donna's husband, tells Donna to move, but she is paralyzed in fear. And Dale actually beheads the zombie with an axe and is out of steam, because, he was chopping wood, so, there's a reason he's out of steam, because he hauled ass. And, yeah. So, and the head was still alive, which, startles all of them. Like, that's... Man, I can't imagine, like, just, people in a zombie apocalypse scenario, and you see a zombie, you behead it thinking, oh, that'll kill it. And it doesn't. Like, that's gotta really suck. Crikey. Like, that is all I'm gonna say. That must suck. Anyways, it cuts to the hunting group, which is still talking, and eventually, the zombie quits eating, because I guess it was tired of being gawked at, talked about like it wasn't there. And Rick puts it down with the axe, and while he's cleaning the axe, he hears a gunshot, and then, Rick and Shane haul ass towards the camp. And when I say haul ass, chat, like, they haul ass, and the reason there was the gunshot was because Alan was putting down the zombie with a rifle, but, in the panic, Lori! And they reunite. Conversation happens. Alan says to get the corpse in the woods and out of the way. Rick says everything's okay now, and Shane is clearly, like, he has a look on his face that's green with envy / going to be a problem. And whereas in the TV show, what happens, hunting and like Shane actually pulls a gun on him, and Dale's there, just gives him a look, and he stops, which is interesting, if nothing else. It's interesting. I don't know why my voice is cracked there. I do apologize, but it is genuinely interesting. Some of the differences between the show and the comic. Anyways, we cut back to the middle of the night, where Rick tries to get Shane's attention like he's a sitcom teen. Literally, he was like, psst, psst. Like, can you fucking imagine? Just zombie apocalypse scenario and there's some jackass? Psst, psst. Like, I'd be like, I would purposely go out of my way to ignore him, and not even like, yeah, Anyways. And this actually apparently startles Shane, who makes a very dumb suggestion for getting his attention, which is throwing a rock. And the reason I call this a dumb suggestion is because, if you're, in some sort of scenario like that, you gotta be quiet, and someone threw a rock at you, my first thing would be probably aim a gun at where that rock came from. And I know that may be a little screwed up, but I mean, come on, in a scenario like that, and there was a rock thrown at me, my first instinct would be, oh, everything's fine. I'd be, oh shit, what's going on, Shit. But anyways, a conversation happens, and one thing I noticed is it has to be about freezing or possibly below, because you can see their breath. And again, everything is so beautifully animated, or I say animated, but so beautifully drawn and shaded, like it's genuinely amazing to me. Anyways, Rick says they gotta move because it's too dangerous because they're too close to the city, and Shane, very naively, but it's understandable, thinks the government will start cleaning the mess. And then Rick throws some very valid points at him, and Shane says, "No, damn it, we're staying here because we're safe." Which I put is laughable and stupid, but again, understandable. That early in the apocalypse, there's still power in some places. That kind of naivety is kind of understandable, I gotta say. Anyways, there's more conversation, and, Rick acquiesces, and then Dale actually said, "Will you keep it down? Some of us are trying to sleep." And then cuts to the morning where Rick catches up with Glenn and asks if he'd seen a gun store, and explains his thinking, which was along the lines of the hurting of people with the government was organized, and very likely be a lack of looting, and where everything went down, they probably would not have any time to break into a gun store where they're usually barred up, and realistically no one would have been able to get through without being eaten, which makes sense. Not just to Glenn, who is, makes sense there, but, to us, the readers, because, yeah, come on. He mentions that, where he doesn't know where the store is, he thinks he knows someone who might. And that is where we see Jim. Glenn asks for help, and Jim knows exactly where. It's like, I don't know, I think he said 5th and Pleasance? I could be misremembering, but I think it was 5th and Pleasance. Don't quote me on this, Chad. I could be genuinely, completely misremembering, but I think that was what it was. But anyways, Glenn thanks him, and Glenn tells Rick he has a map in his car. And we cut to the car where Glenn is looking through. And let me just put it like this, chat. If I was ever in a car and the glove box was filled with that much trash, lordy, like that is just shameful. And I try not to be too much of an ass about that, but it's like, come on, clean your fucking glove box. Don't stuff trash in there. Like there was. Looks like empty drink bottles, there's a flashlight, there was all sorts of assorted horseshit. Come on! Like, Anyways. We cut to a in my notes I put, we cut to a conversation with Lori being a dumbass. Again, a very common theme in this comic. Lori is kind of a dumbass. Anyways. We cut to Glenn and Rick walking towards Atlanta and having a conversation, including the part where Jim, told the story of how he survived Atlanta, including how it was like his family was shielding him from the army of zombies, which Glenn actually says, proving that at least some form of zombie medium must have existed in the Walking Dead universe, or else they wouldn't have said zombies. So, that's something that I always found kind of interesting in the Walking Dead comics. They call it zombies, but in the TV show, walkers, ramblers, shamblers. I mean, really, you're gonna sit here and tell me that people wouldn't have had any idea what zombies were considering they say it in the fucking comics? Come on! And I know that probably shouldn't bug me too much, Chad, but that's something that's always bugged me. Zombie multimedia. Nah, man, these ain't zombies, these are rotters, man. It's like, come on, they're fucking name-dropping them in The Walking Dead, and you're not even taking cues from that? Like, come on. Like, people are still fucking stupid in there, so it's not exactly like you can't play the ignorance card despite zombies multimedia existing, you know? Anyways, Glenn says, damn it, because, you know, the gun store was 5 blocks from where Glenn found Rick, and he never goes that far in, but Rick actually has an idea. And they double back to the, what I affectionately call the Deer Muncher's corpse, and Rick thinks the zombies could smell humans, but yeah, and that's how they could tell humans apart, so we get a conversation which has Rick dismembering the zombie and covering himself in guts, but notably not his face, which it's understandable, because they don't really have too much of an idea how the virus spreads other than through bites. So it makes sense, wouldn't want to possibly ingest some of the virus through the skin in turn. Anyways, they're both covered and make their way to the city, and Glenn humorously remarks that he needs to scratch his nose, which was funny. But anyways, they test the theory that, you know, the smell and whatnot, you know, disguises them, and Rick actually waves his hand in front of, you know, potential ankle biter's face, and it slaps his hand away, but not in the way, oh, I'm gonna fucking bite you, but in the way of, leave me alone, which is interesting. And a conversation happens, including foreshadowing. It's like, wow, what a gloomy day. You know, it's obviously not quite like that, but I'm trying to be semi-censorious. Anyways, they navigate to the right area, and the town looks worse in the further and further they're getting. And then, you know what we finally see in there? The tank, which you did not see in the show, but you also get to see the image. That's the second image you see when you open the Walking Dead comic book. So, and on top of the tank barrel, by the way, this is one thing I noticed, Chad. On the tank barrel, there was a crow. Like, there's a lot of carrion birds in The Walking Dead. And it's interesting that the zombies don't seem to go for them. I almost wonder if, you know, in the Walking Dead comics, the crow, you know, crows eat enough of, I say crows, but any other carrion birds eat enough of the, you know, stuff off the zombies that, you know, it just kind of naturally shields them because they're excreting that zombie stuff. And, you know, where they go in the carrion. Like, that's something I've always wondered. Like, where the carrion birds seem completely fine and don't get attacked, or don't seem to get attacked at all or eaten. You know, it's just one of them things. Anyways, Rick grabs a cart so they could carry more guns. Well, as it flipped over, upturned. Surprised it didn't cause some zombies to go after him. But anyways, Rick actually notices the door is made of wood and, you know, breaks in with the axe. But he mentions they need to hurry because the zombies are starting to realize they were different. And he was saying that they're at a disadvantage not knowing how smart the zombies are at all. Glenn asks what they should get, to which Rick remarks a little bit of everything and to make sure they get a lot of ammo. Glenn says they need to make sure not to grab anything that you know, doesn't work in the guns they get. And as they're leaving, it starts to rain. So Rick kills a zombie, and Glenn has Glenn has a reasonable question about it. And then it starts raining cats and dogs. So, you know, Glenn and Rick start hauling ass, and Glenn panics, but Rick keeps a very level head, like almost unreasonably level. And a zombie actually bites into Rick's shoulder pad, not his shoulder, but the shoulder pad on his uniform jacket. So, you know, Rick distracts them so, you know, Rick can get stuff loaded, and Glenn tells Rick to hurry. And they deal with Rick shooting a lot along the way, and Rick actually kicks the fence down enough to get the cart through, setting up a certain thing later. And you'll understand, if you've seen the show, you know it gets set up. Or if you read the comic, you know it gets set up. Anyways, Rick has certainly lost him, and he takes a breather and takes off his jacket, checks his shoulder, and, oh, thank God, oh, jeez, oh, man, I thought I'd been bitten, to which Glenn says they lucked out this time, and Rick asks Glenn to mention, you know, not to mention how close they came to Lori, which is, you know, understandable, holy shit. Like, that's, man, whoops. Anyways, we cut to Shane trying to comfort Lori, and clearly angling for more than just comfort, if you catch my drift. And Lori is telling, you know, Shane to stop because Rick is alive and her husband, and then she tells Shane that one night on the road down was a mistake. And we cut to what I assume is the next day, but could have been later, with gunshots, which, you know, startled a crow off the corpse was picking at, and then, you know, turns out this was indeed target practice, and Donna is apparently doing great with shooting. Same with Andrea. You know, Rick and Shane shoot the shit, you know, as friends do, and Andrea actually brags a little bit, which is, you know, cool. Whatever works, I suppose. Which, you know, I mean, if that's what makes you happy, keeps up morale, have fun bragging, you know? And Rick actually, you know, asks Carl if he's ready, and Carl rushes, and Rick tells him to slow down. And Lori glares, like she really glares at Rick. And Rick has this, what I can only describe as a strange look on his face, like that he gives back to her. It's both contrite and a partial glare. Like I genuinely still, even now, have no idea what to make of the look he gave back to Lori. Like, it's weird to me, chat. Like, it's, like, I know I'm kind of spending an unreasonable amount of time on certain things, but that look was just strange. Because it's both, again, contrite, but also a glare. Like, what would you even call that? Glare-trite? You know, it's just weird. And, yeah, Carl is actually doing decent shooting, and Rick thinks he's ready to carry a gun around, but I'm just going to point out one thing. Carl is 7 years old as of the first volume, which makes him younger than in the TV show. I think they actually aged him up a couple of years in the TV show, if I'm remembering right. But anyways, they wrap up the practice and head back to camp since it's getting dark, and Rick announces Carl's going to be carrying a gun from now on, and asks them to help keep an eye on Carl. And anyways, Lori leaves in the house, says some stuff, and there's, you know, a couple complaints, but there's also reasonable rebuttals. And then Alan welcomes them back, and there's a quick conversation, you know, a couple of things here and there. Nothing bad. And then Donna, gripes, and Lori makes an actually semi-funny quip back, and Andrea actually says, good one. And one thing in the comics I'd like to point out is Andrea and Carol look almost exactly the same at first. Like, it's kind of weird. But again, where there's no Ed, in the comics, and it's, like, there's a lot of a difference there. Like, it's a very different character. Like, everyone is, like, very, very much different from in the TV show. Like, it's kind of wild to me. But anyways, we cut to Dale, Rick, and Shane having a conversation while doing some wood cutting. And Rick says that Dale is one of his favorite people just for the shower alone. And Rick is also chopping some wood. And Dale says he should get back to camp because he thinks they got enough for tonight, even with a cookout. And Rick asks if they're sure just where it's going to get mighty cold. And Shane actually snaps at Rick, and Rick is silent. I guess doesn't know what to say. And Shane storms off with the firewood, and Dale remarks, "That boy's got problems." Because again, Dale is very different in the issues than he is in the TV show. Like, he's way less naive and whatnot. Like, it's a damn shame they screwed up Dale's character so much. Anyways, we actually cut to the group around the fire, and Rick is grateful for what I'm assuming is a grill from Dale's kit. It's working perfectly, and Rick says he doesn't know how they'd cook meat without it, and Dale mentions he never leaves home without supplies, since you never know when something will come in handy when you're out on the open road, which is foreshadowing. Anyways, Rick remembers that he doesn't know what most of the people were doing before the apocalypse, and a conversation about that actually happens. Dale apparently used to be a salesman, and apparently spent most of his life behind a desk before he and his wife bought that camper, set out to see America, and apparently they've been on the road for the better part of 2 years before everything started happening. And they'd been actually at a campsite 80 miles from Florida. The news hit late, and due to not knowing what was going on, Dale's wife never left the campsite, if you catch my drift. And after she was buried, Dale had set for Atlanta because he had some cousins there and heard it was the safest place nearby, but when he got there, it had already been blocked off, and the army was still trying to fight off the hordes inside. And on the way back, he found Amy and Andrea broke down due to being out of gas, and he gave them a ride. And apparently Andrea, what she was doing was driving Amy back to college, and Amy was, interestingly enough, a physical education major, a junior, according to her. Apparently, she enjoyed her bonding trips with Andrea, who was a clerk at a law firm, which she didn't miss that job. And then Glenn was a pizza delivery boy in Macon, Georgia, who was swimming in debt, and now that the apocalypse happened, he'd very gladly take that life back, which, fair enough. He was on the verge of losing everything and was going to have to go crawling back to his parents for help, and now they knows they can't talk to him if he wanted to. He wants to, which again, that is totally understandable, man. Like, I can almost guarantee you a lot of people, if they could get that life back. In that sort of world, they'd get their life back if they could. Anyways, Alan was apparently a shoe salesman who ran a store in the mall. I'm not exactly sure what that mall is, but the mall. He was also apparently in debt and lived in Gainesville. And on the way back to camp, Alan, Donna, and their 2 kids, which are twins or something like that. It's weird. I don't know really how to describe them. But the car broke down and they walked the rest of the way. And Jim says, mechanic. And Rick talks about his job and how he got there. And Shane actually fills in the rest of the details that happened while Rick was in the coma. And apparently Sophia's dead dad was a car salesman who offed himself when he saw his parents die right after everything happened. Which, that sucks. And Carol came to stay with her sister. Carol described, her dead husband as the breadwinner. So yeah, anyways, Amy had to run to the bathroom, which she says a bit crass, which, irks Donna, but, she asks if she needs anything while she's there. And, Amy leaves. As she's leaving the camper, she gets startled by a zombie coming from the front of the camper, only for the one coming from the back of the camper to chaw through her neck and kill her. Then Rick and Shane start open fire to kill that one, and Andrea panics, and Rick apologizes. Shane warns Rick he wasn't the only one, and the whole group starts firing at the horde after him. Dale tried getting Andrea to safety, because Andrea at that point was still in shock around Amy's corpse. And Laurie tries fleeing but gets surrounded, dropping her gun, but Carl saves her life. And then Carol's life actually gets saved by Glenn, who, interestingly enough, you know what gun he's using, chat? The gun that Glenn is using during this scene is a Luger P08, or at least as close as they can draw to that. Why would there be a Luger P08 in a gun store? That's what's been throwing me off this whole time, because I've been thinking about that. Why is there a Luger P08 in a gun store? You know what I mean? Because when I first saw that, even when I was a kid, I was like, no, that can't be a Luger P08. Because, I used to really spurg for World War II guns. And just guns in general. I still kind of do, but not as much. So when I see something unusual, like back then I had no idea what the hell a Luger P08 was. It was just, Luger! And that's basically all I knew at that point. So knowing it was a Luger P08 was just like, whoa! You know what I mean, guys? So yeah. And Rick asks if everyone's alright, after, Glenn asks Carol if she's alright. And then we get back to the action with everyone firing still, and the zombie actually tackles Jim, who snaps and beats said zombie to death with his pistol. And Shane gets Jim to stop, saying it's over. And the way it is, you can see the zombie with his teeth here. I say here, but it's actually much closer. So I'm assuming, even though it doesn't show it, that that zombie that he beat to death actually bit Jim. Anyways, Dale apologizes to Andrea, who says you can't let Amy come back like that after shooting Amy's corpse in the head. Dale he looks horrified during that, but this is still pretty early into the apocalypse, so, there's some of that cynicism ain't there. Anyways, Laurie apologizes Rick to being mad at him and for being so stupid, and starts saying, if anything happened to him tonight, but then Rick cuts her off saying, I know, it's okay, and then Laurie notices Jim has been bitten, and in this, of course it was this fucking cliched zombie trope. Jim's like, it's just a scratch, but no, there was a huge fucking chunk taken out of his arm. If that's just a scratch, I'd hate to see what he'd consider a grievous injury, Anyways, we cut to the morning with a funeral for Amy and Jim's arm wrapped, and there's a eulogy for Amy from Shane, Donna, Jim, and Dale. And Andrea actually goes off crying. Then we cut to Jim in the tent, looking like a corpse suffering from a fever. And Donna's, checking in on him. If you need anything, just give us a yell. Someone will come get me if I don't hear. And Alan actually thanks her for checking in on him and asks how he is, to which Donna replies worse and mentions that if what Dale says about his wife is true, then Jim doesn't have, long to go. But she also mentions the difference in time in turn between Dale's wife and Jim. And Alan tries to sound convincing, saying maybe it won't happen to him, but it very clearly falls flat with both him and Donna. And then we actually cut to Shane, Rick, and Carl hunting, and Carl loudly complains, to which, Shane shushes him and Carl apologizes. Shane actually nails a rabbit, Rick compliments him, Shane leaves in a huff, and Rick doesn't know what to say. Again. And that's one of my major issues with Rick. Like, a lot of the time, he's just silent and doesn't say anything. Like, as if he doesn't know what to say. Like, oh, man. Like, it's kind of understandable in a way, but at the same time, it's weird, man. I don't know what to say about this. You know what I mean, chat? And anyways, Carl mentions they don't have to get as much where Amy is dead, and, Shane, not Shane, but Jim, is, too sick to eat, and Rick says he knows, and then Shane snaps, and there's a pretty big argument, including a moment that actually kind of gets referenced in Invincible, and it gets so intense that Carl actually runs off crying, but, he's 7, it's understandable, which, that sucks, it's gotta be hell. Anyways, Rick chases after Carl, and then we cut inside the RV, which the way it's drawn, that RV has one of the biggest interiors I have ever seen in an RV, chat. Like, it's genuinely massive. Like, man, what kind of luxury RV did Dale have? Like, it's genuinely, like, you may think I'm just screwing around, but no, it is a massive RV inside. The way it is, it looks more like a trailer than it does an RV. Anyways, Dale is trying to comfort Andrea, and then we cut to the almost corpse of Jim, who's trying to convince them to leave him at a tree near Atlanta, and he convinced them by mentioning it's the only way he'll be with his family again. And Rick asks one last time if Jim's absolutely sure, to which, Jim says to leave him, and that when he comes back, maybe he'll find his family, and maybe they came back too, and maybe they can be together again. And Rick says goodbye to Jim. And then, we cut back to the next morning at the camp, and Shane says Rick to let him know when he's ready, and they'll go hunting. Rick says to give him a few minutes and they'll be ready to go. Carl asks if he can go, and Rick says, not this time. And when Rick says, Shane says, why not? Let him come along. Rick replies they need to talk. And Shane asks what they have to talk about, and Rick very angrily asks, what the hell do you think? And Shane actually punches him in the face and yells, it wasn't my motherfucking fault. And Lori actually calls him a son of a bitch, and does this, on a slap scratch across the face. And, tells him, stay away from him, you fucking lunatic! To which Shane feels what I guess is remorse, or just actually snaps. And Lori asks, what the fuck is wrong with you? And Rick goes, Lori. It's important to note, this even continues to the very end of this issue. Rick's nose has been bleeding this whole time since he was punched in the face by Shane. And Shane actually goes to say something, but cuts himself off. And the whole camp is very clearly tense, and Shane says, fuck this, with tears in his eyes, and run off. And Rick sighs and goes, Shane, wait! And then Lori asks what's happening to them. Dale asks if she's okay, to which she says, it's never going to be the same again. We're never going to be normal, just look at us. And we cut to Rick trying to get Shane to stop, and Shane actually pulls a gun on Rick, and asks, what? What do you want? You come here to rip my heart out of my chest? And Rick asks, Shane, Jesus, what are you talking about? Be careful with that. And Shane replies, go ahead and rip it out. I don't fucking need any more. Take it. And Rick tries de-escalating and asks Shane to put the gun down. And Shane says, you really did it for me, buddy. You really did it. Oh, yes, you did. I'm nothing now, Rick. Nothing. I've got nothing, Rick. No friends. No family. No respect. No fucking life. This fucking world. This godforsaken world of shit. There's nothing for me here, Rick. Nothing. I thought I could make it. I thought I could hold out. Wait until they came and rescued us. They would have brought us nice beds, and hot showers, and fresh clothes. We were coming. They were coming, Rick. We were going to be okay. To which Rick responds, we still are, Shane. Everything's going to be fine. And Shane says, I can't live like this, Rick. I thought I could, but I can't. I thought I could, and I did. Everything was going so good, and she would have come around eventually. I know it. She would have. And Rick, pretty naturally goes, what? And Shane goes, everything was perfect until you came back. And, he pulls the gun on Rick again. And then Rick goes, God damn it, Shane, stop this. And Shane goes, no, Rick, this is the only way. This is what has to happen. You weren't meant to come back. You weren't meant to live. And Shane is, in tears, pleading for Shane not to do this. And out of nowhere comes Carl, who shoots Shane through and through the neck, with tears in his eyes, yelling, don't hurt my daddy again! And, Shane is choking to death on his own blood until he falls and dies. And, Rick holds Carl close, saying, oh, son, in a small voice. And Carl, in a smaller voice, says, it's not the same as killing the dead ones, Daddy. And Rick replies, it never should be, son. It never should be. And again, throughout this whole part, I'm just going to point out again, Rick's nose was bleeding. It still was. And, you know, with the way Shane's corpse is played out, like the gun, like his gun is actually under his leg, partially. Anyways, we finally get, you know, that's the end of the issue, and we actually get to the bottom cover of the comic, which says, "How many hours are in a day when you don't spend half of them watching television? When is the last time any of us really worked to get something we wanted? The world we knew is gone. The world of commerce and frivolous necessity has been replaced by a world of survival and responsibility. An epidemic of apocalyptic proportions has swept the globe, causing the dead to rise and feed on the living. In a matter of months, society has crumbled. No government, no grocery stores, no mail delivery, no cable TV. In a world ruled by the dead, we are forced to finally start living." And in my notes I wrote, "Man, what a great start to an even better series. I absolutely love this. I remember being introduced to these comics / graphic novels when I was in my last year of elementary school, and I have loved these ever since. There's just nothing like this anymore, which is a damn shame because, again, I absolutely love this. That being said, HBO still should have done the TV show instead of AMC adopting it. And, you know, but all in all, I'd have to give this opening volume a 7 out of 10, which I would rate higher, but my issue, and I'm sure you guys don't understand, is there is a lot of repetition and rehashing in the dialogue to the point of what I can only describe as annoyance. Because it was that bad, Chad, genuinely. Which is a shame, but, you know, what can you do? Which, you know, it sucks, but still. Alright, 7 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching. I wish you the best.